Hello. Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us for episode 3 of Earthshare in partnership with Arlington Garden in Pasadena and LA Nature for All. Today, I'm very excited to be talking with Michael Martinez, who is the co-founder and executive director of LA Compost. In case you didn't know, LA Compost has community co-op hubs all across Los Angeles County where you can sign up to volunteer, to have free education about compost, to drop off your compost and of food scraps, and then help maintain it, and then take home that precious compost for yourself. And what's very special about the compost hub at Arlington Garden is that you have an option if you're signed up to drop off your food scraps and help maintain the compost bin. You can either take home the finished product of compost or leave it at the garden where we will put it in the orange grove, and it'll help maintain and the healthy soil there that grows the oranges that is turned into the marmalade you can help the garden by buying.
You can eat our compost on toast.
So let's see here. Thanks for joining us again, everybody. Hi,
There he
Michael.
is.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Check.
Yes, all good.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. Personally, I'm always excited to hear you talk about yourself and what you do. So you're definitely top of our list when we're thinking of making these episodes.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah,
Or just...
sure. Good afternoon, evening, wherever it is you're joining from. My name is Michael Martinez. I currently work for an amazing organization called LA Compost. We are a nonprofit organization that is 7 years old that works throughout Los Angeles County, really working to connect the people of LA to the soil and each other through a variety of different program offerings. One of which I believe was just mentioned was through our community compost hub effort. And we are only as strong as our partners. So as strong as our partners are, we get to come alongside and work alongside the incredible work that is already being done. But we're just really privileged and fortunate to be operating in the space in which we're operating, and understanding the importance of soil, the importance of just community, and how they really intersect and parallel more ways than one. So yeah.
Awesome. I'll kick off by asking, what does nature mean to you?
Yeah, I think nature to me really is just life. I feel like growing up, I would often box that term to mean only things that were really distant from me, or things that we had to go visit, such as like grow up here in the San Gabriel Valley. So it's like, oh, when we go to the mountains, we're in nature. Oh, we went to a lake, we're in nature, river, ocean. But like little by little, as I grew up, I realized that like nature isn't what's around us, it is us. Like we are nature, we are a part of it, and how our effort and role is connected to it. It is one and the same. So I think for me, nature is very much so life, but it also is something that doesn't work in isolation. To me, nature, I think of as something that is systems based, that is gives, and it is selfless, and it is something that ensures that the health and well-being of everything around it is important. And I also feel like for us with LA Compost, when I say connecting the people of LA to the soil and one another, it really is essentially connecting people to life and what brings them life, and reminding people of our humanity, and recognizing that when the earth is in pain, that is also because we are in pain. Like the intersection between it all, I feel like is important to recognize. It is not some distant thing. Even if you're in Los Angeles in an apartment with the alleyways, your backyard, and your window view is a cement brick wall, like you are a representation of nature in and wherever you are. So how does your life bring life to the space in which you are at? And I think oftentimes we feel like we have to get out in nature to experience that life. But no, our life contributes to all life that is around us. And when we begin to mimic how natural systems work, we see how we can breathe. It's this beautiful inhale, exhale experience of not just taking what nature has to offer, but giving and providing and sharing that energy um, that is naturally around us as well. So a simple term, nature is life. I think as an elementary, like I have a 3-year-old son, like I would just box it up, and it's too big to be boxed. So yeah.
So, given that nature is everywhere and everything, one of our questions was what your first memories of nature are and where those came about.
Yeah. Since I kind of said that like I would box it up as a child, the first memory that like is deeply ingrained and rooted in my memory bank is like growing up in the San Gabriel Valley. The earliest memories of nature was just like my home, my childhood home in the San Gabriel Valley. We had a lot of orange trees. We had a little small garden and a fairly large avocado tree. And it wasn't so much the trees, but what made the experience truly magical was that my grandfather was a carpenter, my father is an upholsterer, so they were very well to do with tools and all that. But they essentially built a tree house for my brother and I. And that to me was the most connected experience as a kid that I can remember, as far as like literally being in a tree. And we've camped many times with like my church and with my family, but I remember like one time spending the night in that treehouse. I thought it was the most brave thing I can do as like a 9-year-old. I was just like, oh my gosh, we are spending the night outside. And although we were in Southern California, it was not cold, not warm, it was like a perfect evening. I think it was just a sacred experience that left an imprint on me because of how close that I felt to it. And I obviously didn't recognize or realize what I do now as far as like we are nature, but to me, sleeping in the branches of a tree, hearing the leaves brush against each other, hearing a bird on a branch, like it reminded me that like we are it, and it was that close to me as well, even in the city, even my backyard. But yeah, like I've been to the rivers and the oceans, but to me, sleeping in the tree house that my father and grandfather built was the most memory that has left the biggest imprint, at least up until this point.
Um, so we talked a little bit about Arlington. Uh, I'm just curious, how did it come about, the partnership that you chose to bring the community co-op hub to a public garden?
Specifically Arlington or just gardens in general?
Yeah, or broadly.
Yeah, I'll answer both. So each year we kind of host a little gathering for our community called a gratitude party. And I believe in 2019 we held our gratitude party at the Audubon Center at Debs Park. I think Marcos, I saw him on here, the director there. Kim Ebling, which hosts like a lot of the events around Los Angeles, actually was a facilitator of that space and was actually very close and connected to Michelle at the Arlington Garden. So when she heard about our work and heard about what we did, she actually wanted to make it a point for us to connect with Arlington Garden, just because of the beauty that is Arlington and I guess the good work that it is we're doing. She wanted the two to at least meet. So I think that was in early 2019 when was the first time I met Michelle. But I'm kind of embarrassed because like I grew up in and around Arlington. My mom's first job was in Pasadena. Like we've passed by Arlington since as early as I can remember, but I've never stopped and I've never seen it. And obviously, it is what it is after a series of growth and investment and energy. But uh, I met Michelle, I met the two of you, I met Lee, I met the wonderful volunteers, and we just kind of talked about what it would look like to allow for us to create a space for members to participate and collectively compost and build soil and the health of their soil together. We actually didn't have a hub in Pasadena at the time, so Arlington Gardens was the first hub in Pasadena. And Arlington Gardens was actually one of the first cooperative hubs that we launched. So when we first started and we launched the compost drop-off model, it was very much so like, here's access to this hub, freeze your food scraps, drop it off. Thank you very much. I feel good about that effort. We wanted it to be a little bit more, create some more investment and not just kind of allow for the majority of the work to fall on our compost managers, which is our staff and our team. So the co-op experience and the co-op hubs essentially ask those that are dropping off to ensure that the flow and the work of that hub is maintained collectively, and that work is distributed across the shoulders of everyone that is participating. Um, so we built that hub, and it is one of our most active hubs out of our network of 33 locations throughout the county. We actually just reached capacity at the hub with the amount of people that are participating, but and we sifted some of the finished compost a few weeks ago, and it's just like, for those of you that haven't visited Arlington, I'm assuming many of you have if you're on this channel, but it is a magical space. Like, to just be able to walk and breathe and not see the visual traffic that is around you. And it is also such a joy for us to not even work, but just to experience that space when we are supporting it. But Arlington is one of 33 locations. Every single one of our locations is in partnership with the community organizations such as Arlington, doing solid work in the community. Um, we don't own any land. We don't own any space. Every single hub is in partnership with the community that has built a level of trust and transparency and is just doing solid work in that area. So in many ways, compost is all about adding life and value to what it is around. So in many ways, our hubs reflect that. Arlington was a magical space before our hub. It is a magical space without it, but the compost that we're able to create can add a little bit of life and value and soil vitality to the oranges, to the many beautiful trees and shrubs that you have. But I think what's beautiful about Arlington and what we want to kind of make the norm across all our hubs is the level of engagement with the people in that area. How are we creating green spaces, supporting green spaces, and making sure that green spaces isn't just something that a privileged zip code can have, but something that needs to be in every zip code. And I'm not just talking about parks, but like like the space that you have in Arlington is something I would dream of having in every zip code across LA County. As far as a space where people can gather, they can breathe, and they can kind of reset and be reminded um, of their humanity in many ways and their energy that they bring. I feel like we're so ingrained in the day to day, and obviously very much distracted with technology and social media, that I feel like when you are in a space that has so much life and energy and life trend, yeah, so much life, I feel like your system kind of reboots or malfunctions in a good way as far as remembering how things should and can be.
A question about if you could just talk about how, I know you guys work really broadly across LA County, to talk about the diversity of the communities that you do work in, what those different connections look like, how you support that community, how does that community support you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How do those different communities work? What are some of the challenges also in working in different communities?
Yeah, so um, there is no universal blanket approach to this work. I feel like LA is LA because of the people who call it home. I always say the beauty of a compost power through the diversity of its ingredients, and the beauty of Los Angeles are from the many people who actually call LA home. Like, no neighborhood is alike, and I think that's what makes LA not only resilient but also like healthy and strong, and like a vision for what the future should look like. But I think for us, the diversity of each community is placed to the strength of our work. I feel like I want our team to not only reflect the communities that they're serving in, but reflect the city as a whole. So the approach that we've taken is all of our compost managers, for the most part, I want to say like 90% of them, are born and raised in the community that they are servicing. So in Arlington, we have someone who's born and raised in Pasadena who also supports that space, born and raised in Highland Park that supports that space. South LA, same thing. West Side, same thing. Valley, same thing. Northeast LA and San Diego. Like, so how do we ensure that the people that are servicing and working alongside those communities are from that community? That's really important for us. Um, Another thing for us is I mentioned the strength of our work is through our partnerships. So every single one of our hubs is in partnership with a community organization already established doing good work. So we kind of take the lens as far as is their mission, vision, and value alignment, and ensure that we are supporting the work that's already being done. So we have hubs in gardens like Arlington. We have hubs at parks. We have hubs at churches, at schools, at apartment complexes. Um, and I think rather than seeing things as challenges, like we try to view it as like an opportunity for growth in many ways. One of the most beautiful hubs that we work with is actually at a housing project. It is with an incredible organization called Roots for Peace and the phenomenal work that they do. But that hub is incredible, from changing policy to actually grow food in housing projects, to growing their own food, to building their own soil. And we can't take an ounce of credit for the work that's being done, because even when we showed up to build the hub, their community showed up in numbers to support and facilitate that. So I don't, the only challenge I see in many ways is space available and community that's available to participate. But when we actually build, like, we're always so humbled by how people show up and creating the space and access and opportunity. One of the things I often say is, from an education standpoint, education is only as strong as the access and opportunity you provide someone to put what was learned into practice. Because otherwise, oftentimes it becomes this verbal junk mail of like, oh, you need a compost, or oh, we need to divert food scraps from landfill, or oh, the greenhouse gas emissions are 85 times worse than the tailpipe of your car. But I think the biggest thing for us is the learning is in the doing, and let's build it in the spaces where people are naturally doing life. And we can't keep up. We're trying to grow and we want to grow well, but I think what excites me is the momentum and energy that is available. People recognize what's important. I think this current pandemic has really allowed people to start to garden, cook more, recognize that, wow, these food scraps still have value. But to your question, Levi, the communities that we work with are absolutely the strength of our work. It is the community leaders, it is the community volunteers, organizers, and interns that really make the space what it is. Yeah.
What inspired you to get involved with this kind of work?
Yeah, so my parents did a good job as far as like cooking and having a little garden and growing food. And I think it wasn't until I was a fifth, I had the privilege of being a fifth grade reading and writing teacher. And it was in my classroom that I would often use garden analogies, as far as having a seed and saying this seed represented them and it needed a lot of things to pour into it in order for it to grow and thrive. And that their growth wasn't just about them, it was about the shade it provided, the structure it provided, the food it provided, the life to the organisms. And essentially, as a fifth grade teacher, I was able to work with some of the other staff on campus to build a little school garden. And it was really at that school garden where the seeds of LA Compost were planted. The school garden was nothing profound, or it was essentially just a space for kids to see something different. And I'm happy to hear and see that it's still going on to this day. But many of my students just had a hard time understanding where food came from. And it wasn't my reality, and it wasn't an opportunity for me to like say like, I can't believe you don't know. But how did I make it a real teachable moment, to like make it a teachable moment and make it a real life experience? One of the questions that I'll never forget is an honest question one of my students asked was, how does a hot Cheeto grow? And it wasn't like try to like to mess with Mr. Martinez. It was a snack that they would consume weekly, and trying to recognize where that came from. And we followed up with questions like, well, where does carrots come from, or where does this, and not seeing and not being able to trace that really left an imprint on me as well. So the little school garden that we created essentially allowed students to be a part of something that was bigger than themselves. They saw carrots come from the ground. They were picking their own strawberries. They obviously had like everything you could think of, from like the cauliflower, broccoli, the asparagus, and so on. But the seeds of LA Compost really started in that school garden. But coming back to LA, which is home and will be home for me, my brother and I and a few friends and family actually just kind of launched this idea of like, well, what would it mean to like mimic that transformative experience, as far as kids recognizing that food came from the ground, and after the table experience, it returns to the ground. It's not just garden to table or farm to table, but what happens after that table experience? And how is it this closed loop system that nature naturally intended it to be? Because we talked about what is nature. Nature is not waste. There really is no waste in nature. Everything in nature, including us, has value and can contribute. We are the only living beings within this natural system that generate what we call waste. So how do we close this loop? So what we did was we launched this pilot program as far as like picking up food scraps on bike, going to juice bars, taco shops, little areas in the areas that we grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. We started like in Whittier, Covina, Baldwin Park, and West Covina. And I literally just convinced friends and families if we could build compost bins in their backyard. And we took that material there. All the compost we created, we gave away at farmers markets. The donations we received at the farmers markets, we built schools at at elementary schools. We built school gardens. One of the first school gardens we built was actually at my old elementary school. But this work was very much beyond me. It wasn't just like my idea or my thing. It was a family, friends, community, partner effort as far as other groups doing this work as well. This work, community composting, has definitely grown over time. There's quite a few community composters across the country. But I think for me, the inspiration for this work started at an early age, as far as the experience of being outside, the importance of learning outside, appreciating food, and understanding that like the experience that my fifth grade students had, as far as like the aha moment, as far as like, oh, food comes from the ground, it returns to the ground, and it's this closed loop system. That transformative experience took place in community alongside others. Like they were constructing their own knowledge. They weren't being told how to think or what to believe. They came to that conclusion on their own. And for me, it's like, I want to establish and work with communities and with my team to create systems and places for people to coexist well, to do life well, to learn by doing, and to ensure that everything and everyone benefits from the actions that are taking place. And it's not solely benefiting one individual or one space. But the inspiration of LA Compass very much came from the experience I had growing up, the experience I had as a teacher, and now this work is way beyond Michael Martinez. It is a reflection of the thousands of community members across LA. It is a reflection of my incredible staff and team. I love when people don't know who I am when I am doing this work. You know, it's bigger than me, and it should be. And I think what excites me about moving forward is like where it's going. You know, there's so much excitement. Our hubs are reaching capacity. Like the city is getting on board, the state is getting on board. Like, and it's not to say it's our effort or individual efforts. It's the collective community efforts. It's the collective individual acts that are taking place. And we often remind people, although your 3 pounds might seem insignificant, you are part of something much bigger than yourself, not just in Pasadena or LA County, but across California, across this country, and reminding them that their small efforts have a compounding effect across the board.
One of the questions that I wanted to ask is one of the things that we talk about at Arlington Garden is equity in access. Arlington is a garden that is free. It's open to the public. Anybody can come and go. And, you know, so we talk about how do people feel comfortable to come to the garden, how people feel safe coming to the garden, who represents the garden on our side, as far as like who is in the conversation about what happens at the garden. So what I'm wondering is, what does that look like for you in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think for us, it's ensuring that we're part of different levels of community engagement. And one of the things we've learned is you can't just come into a space, build, and expect for investment and buy-in to happen. I think a lot of this work actually has to come in conversation with the communities that you're actually working with. I think for us, a lot of listening. I think oftentimes we see how groups come in and say what needs to be changed or what needs to be added. Oftentimes, like we actually don't approach spaces anymore to build new hubs, or at least that's not the approach we're taking. A lot of it is just conversation and co-creating, listening, taking the time to recognize like, well, what is needed? How do we get there? And how do we not just build resilience? Because right now the key word and the heavy word that I hear is resiliency, resiliency, resiliency. And to me, resiliency is being able to get back up after you keep getting knocked down. To me, it's like, how do we go beyond resiliency, and how do we build true, equitable and healthy communities? That's a neighbor to neighbor approach. That's growing food for yourself, growing food for someone else. Maybe someone has a water catchment, someone is building their soil, someone is growing food. And to me, it goes back to just listening. I think asking yourself who's not at the table, who's not part of the conversation, and are we serving a community whose voices aren't even represented here? And even 7 years into this, we're still learning and growing in this. In no way, shape, or form have we perfected this. I think the small step that we've taken is ensuring that our staff members are actually from the communities in which they're serving, so that they actually know who has been in that community working for many years, making sure that their voices are included, their interests and efforts are kept in mind, but never assuming that a community wants or needs something. But also, to me, the gospel of compost, as I want to say, is really important. And not to say that it is the most important thing, because when someone is facing issues with rent or just getting food on the table or childcare, talking about like, hey, do you know that like your food scraps need to be diverted from landfills? Probably not top of mind. But when you start to make it bigger picture and you start to talk about the environmental injustices that take place across the county, like, why is it that majority of the trash is sent to your neighborhood? And why is it that you don't have parks or a farmer's market or a green space? Or you start to realize that they really do intersect. Like when you build the health of the soil, you are building the foundational pieces for other things to happen. And I think when people start to realize we all want green spaces, we all want tree canopies, we all want to be close to a watershed and have nutrient dense food and have spaces where we can breathe and live. And I think for us, it's not just like convincing people that they want this, but allowing them to say like, well, we've had it and we don't have it anymore because of this. And I think just taking the time to listen, and I say this as something that I still need to be better at, I say this as something that we want to continue to improve, will show that there is already strength and power in those communities that perhaps we could have bypassed, right? It's like, oh, we want to help you build a hub. Oh, well, we have a 7-acre farm that we just need support because we don't have water infrastructure. Or, oh, we want to help build your soil. Oh, cool, but we have equestrian centers and mulch deliveries. And like, there is strength and power that exists in every zip code, but unless you pause on our personal agenda and just like listen and get to what needs to be get to the finished product collectively and together, I think that's really important. So for us, from like, I think right now too, we're talking about a lot of the way in which like things intersect. There is no climate justice without focusing on social and racial justice. Like everything is connected, and being okay to have these conversations and being okay to talk about like, well, why is that and what can we do to change that and how do we shape the new narrative that we're trying to create. I don't know if that really answered your question.
I think it definitely did.
I love it. I'd like to remind everyone that you can ask questions in the comment section as well, and you can read them out loud. And earlier someone asked, why isn't the model where you can just drop off scraps? Why do you have to become a member? And you said so many great alliterative words that kind of describe this. Collectively compost, co-creating, being cooperative. And I think it's really important. I'd love for you to reflect on that too. But when I participated in the community gathering to help volunteer, I met so many new people in my neighborhood. I learned about compost. We were all encouraged to get our hands in and feel how warm it is and look at all the microorganisms that are working together. And it was such a wonderful learning experience.
Right.
So if you could talk a little bit how that came about, maybe even organically, but why you see it as a cooperative experience.
Yeah, I will definitely get to that. And I also want to just make sure, back to Levi's point, like, how is it still accessible and equitable for maybe someone who is a single parent with many kids and multiple jobs that doesn't have time to volunteer, even even 4 hours. Like, so that's why we've created other avenues for them to still come and drop off, but not at a community hub. So I'll just speak of the 3 tiers of our program, and then I'll speak to how we organically got to that community co-op model. So we have three branches of our program that focus on the individual, the community, and the regional. The individual focuses on workshops, work days, and our farmers market food scrap drop-off program. So the farmers market program is literally that: just come, drop off, and go on your way. There's no investment or attachment or volunteer required. That is for someone that just needs to drop off. Obviously, it's a little difficult right now with many of the farmers markets closed, or with certain safety protocols. We've created alternative models for that. So if anyone that wanted to drop off at Arlington and is in that Pasadena area, there are alternative drive up drop off models on the weekend that we can easily point you to. The second tier of our programs is a community model. This is all the community hubs, the 30 community hubs that we have in schools, churches, community gardens, parks, where we built it alongside an organization and build infrastructure for not only compost to be made on site and food scraps to be kept on site, but for 50 to 100 families to also participate in drop off. And then the third arm is our regional hubs, which is at farms or urban parks, where we just have larger capacity to work with food recovery agencies, local businesses and restaurants. As much as I'm going to preach the gospel of compost, the highest value of food is getting it to people who can still eat it. So definitely talking about the importance of food recovery agencies and how we work alongside them. But we started as this community hub drop-off model in 2014. And as great as it was not regenerative by any means, because the demand to grow more community hubs, we are a nonprofit, we're not city or federally funded. We are based off the individual donations and private foundations. But as we grew, we were only going to grow well if the community met us or took ownership. Essentially, the 3 E's was educate, equip, and empower for the community to take over the space, and not solely rely on an LA Compost staff member to come and weigh and turn and water and sift. We realized that burnout was going to be inevitable if we kept growing, and with the physical upkeep of the compost process was solely on our compost managers. So the co-op model was not just a model that we created, it was a model we saw successful also in the DC area on the East Coast, as far as people showing up one Saturday out of the year, and that was their contribution to the space. We can't talk about like connected experiences, nature doesn't work in isolation and all this, if then we are isolating our staff members to do the work on their own. So very much everything that we say, we want to make sure that we are also living it, and also practicing and stewarding that. So the co-op model to us is one offering. It is not the one all be all food access, food acceptance model, but it is a model that distributes the collective work across the many souls that are contributing to that space. And one prime example of how that model is working well outside of Arlington is we have a co-op model in downtown Los Angeles. Very saturated apartment buildings, a lot of people wanting the screen space. This co-op was at capacity within its first few weeks with the amount of people dropping off. Unfortunately, one day a car, it's right next to a parking lot, a car actually drove through the second floor, the driver's okay by the way, drove through the second floor and landed on our compost bin. And the garden's 250 feet wide, our bins are 10 feet, and of course it landed on the compost bins. We emailed the co-op members and showed them pictures. Unfortunately, the co-op has to be closed for the next 3 weeks for hub maintenance, repair, etc. We had so many people email saying, what can I do to help? I can't store my scraps for 3 weeks. I want to make sure that this is up and running, not just for me, but for my neighbors. The amount of love and energy and donations we got to like fix that hub within a few days was a true representation of the efforts, not just being the nonprofit, but of the collective community who makes that space. And to me, it just, the more people you have gathered, coexisting well, and collectively focused on the goodness that can take place within their neighborhood, it's going to be 1,000 times better than the singular efforts of a single soul trying to work in isolation. So I hear the fact that the co-op model could be difficult for some people, and we are doing our best to grow the farmers market model, as well as other drop-off models where it's just a drive-up, drop-off, and still compost within your community. So we're trying to meet people where they're at, while also ensuring that the programs can outlive us, because we've also seen co-op models that don't need us anymore. When we want to say, hey, do you want us to teach a workshop? Like, no, we've taught 7 already. Like, you got it, you know? So it's like, we want to make sure that the discipleship and the support that LA Compost is providing is always going to be there, but that little by little the community takes over, so that we can support the new efforts as well.
Do you feel like that's the ideal vision you're working toward?
I think the thing that I keep going back to when I think of vision and like future is like a strong human network. I'm always blown away by the fact that LA County is the most populous county in the country. You know, I always ask, like, how many people do you think we have in this county? It's like 10.2 million people from Catalina Island to Pomona. Like, we would be the eighth largest state based off of population if LA County was its own state. So there's a lot of people. So for me, it's like, how do we mimic the beautiful soil food web that is beneath our feet above the ground? If you're familiar with the soil food web, you just see this incredible connected system of micro and macro organisms working to build the health and vitality of the soil that feeds us all. And we know so little about this beautiful magic that's happening beneath our feet. But if we can begin to mimic that above ground, from like Arlington to Venice to Eagle Rock to Watts to Cypress and Glassell Park, like, you start to see the connections, and you start to see that this powerful human network has the capacity and the potential to create something that is beyond all of us. We are building the soil, but we are also, I always like to use like the phrase that like soil and soul, the only two letters that separate those words are you and I. Like, it is, we are so connected to not only each other, but the soil. Like, we've all had our own experience. Like, the first question you asked was like, what's your first experience with nature? We all have an experience of touching the ground, of touching the soil, of being in community, of having a meal that was prepped in front of you, of eating a peach off the tree in season. Like, how do we create not just the physical infrastructure for compost and soil building to happen, but the social infrastructure for the building up of communities and people to happen in unison? And I think the vision for me is like, seed, water, and soil become the most valuable currency when we think about health and vitality. And I think true freedom is really when we're able to feed ourselves, not just feed, right? Feeding more ways than one. How do you feed yourself, but feed your community and build up your community? And I don't know, I think that I want to go beyond just like resilient and survive. Like, no, I want to be holistic health, and I want us to thrive. And liberation and freedom and the ability to thrive doesn't happen alone. You know, it has to happen with those around you, and ensuring that you're not getting up on others because of the extractive behavior of yourself, but how are we building collectively, you know? So I guess my vision for the future is like, how do we make LA a model city that doesn't have to copy anyone else, so that we don't always have to look up north to see what the Bay is doing, or look across the country to see, oh, I wish we had this. No, it's like LA is unlike any other city. So our solutions need to be unlike any other city. As dynamic as our issues are, our solutions need to be just as innovative and dynamic. So I'm very much hopeful. I'm born and raised in the city. I take a lot of pride in LA and what it is. And, you know, it's not Griffith Park, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, or anything that makes LA. It's the people. It's the zip codes. You can't experience LA on a layover or a weekend. You have to breathe it. You have to be in community with the people who call it home. And same thing with compost. It's not a microwave approach. You have to take it down. You have to be patient. You have to understand that anything of value worth having should take time. So, yeah, my vision for the future is, how do we be more like the compost process? How do we look at the collective imperfections, not as something that is a challenge, but something that truly allows us to achieve wholeness? Because compost is that. It brings the imperfect things of fallen fruits, leaves, stable bedding, whatever it may be. But it's only when those things are brought together do you create the beautiful thing that we all want in our gardens. And for us, can you imagine if that's how our communities were? It's like, we are obviously, I don't use the word broken often, but we are imperfect and broken. And it's when those collective imperfections and brokenness is brought together that wholeness is achieved and life is magnified in many ways. So, yeah.
I think one of the beauties in the way that you and LA Compost deal with compost locally, in community, and it's what you're actually dealing with is something that could otherwise be problematic, right? You're dealing with what could be waste, but you're turning it into a resource, and you're doing it in a way that rather than alienating people from it and sending it to someone else's neighborhood, some other landfill somewhere away, right? You're actually taking that what could have been problematic and you're actually making it into something beautiful, like what you described. And in that process of dealing with those those potentials together and locally, I think you're describing well, so we have this big question sitting here on this paper in front of me, which is how you envision the future, the best possible future, and I think in the way that you describe uh, not only your organization's relationship to compost, but the relationship to looking at local communities as the solution. Um, I don't know. Do you want to take that idea and run with it? Your vision for the future.
Yeah, I think the key word that you brought up was this idea of a way. And I hear this often, and people speak on it way better than I can ever. But there is no such thing as a way. A way just means out of our neighborhood, out of sight, out of mind. And we've seen the commercials growing up of the dolphin knocking on the door with the litter that ended up in their ocean, right? Like, imagine we did that with all the food that we throw away, you know? Like, if it was in our neighborhoods, we'd be looking at solutions rather quickly. I always encourage people to go to a landfill, not on a date, but as a reminder of like the issue that is at hand, the issue of waste and assuming things just go away. Um, I think it's really important to understand that one, there's no such thing as a way. Two, look at things from the lens of there is no such thing as waste. And three, how do we transform that mentality of waste to resource? Because now it's like if we not just commodify it, but like put value on it. Like if food scraps are seen as valuable, if mulch is seen as valuable, if organic material is seen as valuable, that we don't want to go away. We don't want it to get outside of Pasadena. We don't want it to go outside our neighborhood. We want that to build our soil. We want that to grow our food. We want that. It becomes this coveted item. It becomes this thing that is seen as sacred and life and valuable that we get to steward and support. And it is a reminder of what has been here before us and what will be here after us. And that has to happen with local communities. That has to happen with people making those decisions for themselves because, um, yeah, I mean, what better people to make the decisions for their own neighborhood and their own block than the people who've called those blocks home for generations? You know, um, I think there just needs to be new value. And I think this soil and people, right? Not to say we throw people away, but we push people away. We box people. There's so many parallels between how we see this, and I think we need to just look at it a little different and see the true story. Allow the full story to be told, and how we play just a small piece in that narrative. So, I guess my vision again is how do we build a decentralized model that is not focused on this one mega entity that's going to take care of it all, but the thousands and maybe millions of spaces that need to exist to breathe and create life, whether it's in a backyard, a balcony worm bin, Griffith Park, Arlington Gardens, every high school, every church, library, and farmers market. How do we make compost and soil building normal? And not just normal, but needed and like a sense of urgency, you know? Um, we are more conscious of using less water when we hear about the fact that we don't have much of it left. I think the same needs to be true of just the health of our soil. You know, it doesn't matter how you look, what you believe, or where you live, we all eat. And all food comes and is connected to the soil and the earth. And I think it needs to be viewed as sacred. And when it is viewed as sacred, we will create the imaginative and constructive solutions that are needed to move this forward. And we are just a very small piece in that, you know. Um, there are incredible groups across the country. There are phenomenal groups in LA who work alongside us, and it has to be like LA Sanitation, County Board of Public Works, LA Compost. We can't do it alone. It has to be this collective effort. So I apologize for those of you watching that aren't connected to a hub because it's at capacity. we're doing the best we can to build that. Um, but yeah, we are leaning on the community as much as they are leaning on us.
We have one last question that someone asked. What book or resource about compost, soil, and human relationships has inspired you?
Oh, there's been a lot. Um, Nikki Silvestri up in the Bay is a phenomenal speaker. I think her website's called Soil and Shadow. She does this beautiful, she speaks of the soil and soul connection much better than I ever could. Obviously, Kiss the Ground here in Los Angeles does some incredible videos about the soil story, the compost story, the importance of regenerative agriculture, and like not just talking about sustainability, because to me, sustainability is like a revolving door. You're left exactly where you started if you just keep doing it. But what does it mean to engage in something that is regenerative? Um, if you're looking to understand the importance of compost and how the micro and macroorganisms work, Teaming with Microbes is a really fun book. A little sciencey, but that's a really great one. Um, but maybe I could put together a list or something and send it over to you all, and you can have that, I don't
Yeah,
know, on your website
absolutely.
or something. I think that'd be great.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I don't know, thank you for
yeah,
doing all the work you
of
do. It's very
course. Thank
inspiring.
you all. I appreciate the work that both of you do as well, uh, individually, collectively, and like with the community. So we're super fortunate to share the space at Arlington with you, and we look forward to growing it in more ways than one. So thanks for your time.
Anything we didn't ask you that you wanted to answer?
Um, I'm sure I'll think of something after we hang up on this call, but
Right?
no, I think you both did a great job, and I hope I answered the questions
Oh, yeah.
in ways that allowed those watching to receive something. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Take care. Bye.